Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to start. The 65th Plenary Meeting of the General Assembly is called to order. The Assembly will now take up a request submitted by the Secretary General contained in Document A, Slide 79, Slide 759, relating to the election of a member of the International Court of Justice. In his note, the Secretary General informs the Assembly of the resignation of Judge Nawaf Salam, effective 14th January 2025. Therefore, a vacancy in the court occurred on 14th January 2025. On 24th January 2025, the Security Council adopted Resolution 2770/2025, in which it decided that the date of the election to fill the vacancy should be 27th May 2025. Since the agenda of the current session of the Assembly does not contain a sub-item concerning the election of members of the International Court of Justice, the Secretary General requests, pursuant to Rule 15 of the Rules of Procedure, the inclusion in the agenda of the 79th session of an additional sub-item entitled, and I quote, "Election of a member of the International Court of Justice," end of quote, under item 114 entitled, "Elections to fill vacancies in principal organs." Owing to the nature of the sub-item, unless there is an objection, may I take it that the Assembly agrees to waive the relevant provision of Rule 40 of the Rules of Procedure, which will require a meeting of the General Committee on the question of the inclusion of this additional sub-item in the agenda. I see no objection. It is so decided. May I take it that the Assembly, on the proposal of the Secretary General, wishes to include in the agenda of the current session, under item 114 entitled, "Elections to fill vacancies in principal organs," an additional sub-item entitled, "Election of a member of the International Court of Justice," under heading I, Organizational, Administrative, and Other Matters. It is so decided. May I also take it that it is the wish of the Assembly to consider this sub-item directly in plenary meeting? It is so decided. I should like to inform members that this additional sub-item becomes sub-item C of agenda item 114. The Assembly will consider sub-item A of agenda item 32 entitled Prevention of Armed Conflict. In connection with agenda item 32, the Assembly has before it a note by the Secretary General transmitting the 11th report of the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism to assist in the investigation and prosecution of persons responsible for the most serious crimes under international law committed in the Syrian Arab Republic since March 2011, circulated in document A, slide 79, slide 799. Pursuant to Resolution 73/182 of 17 December 2018, I give the floor to Mr. Robert Petty, head of the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism, to assist in the investigation and prosecution of persons responsible for the most serious crimes under international law committed in the Syrian Arab Republic since March 2011, to present the report of the mechanism.
Distinguished President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to brief the General Assembly for the first time under the agenda item Prevention of Armed Conflict since I took over my role as head of the International, Impartial and Independent Mechanism to assist in the investigation and prosecution of persons responsible for the most serious crimes under international law committed in the Syrian Arab Republic since March 2011. I particularly welcome the presence of His Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Assad al-Shabani, to this debate. Mr. President, the events of 8 December 2024 marks a pivotal moment in Syria's history. As the United Nations Secretary General said, it is a flame of hope that must not be extinguished. The end of more than 13 years of conflict and of 50 years of authoritarian rule constitute an opportunity to build a future Syria on justice and the rule of law. These are the founding principles enshrined in the 2016 resolution that created the mechanism in this very assembly. Member states of this assembly called for ensuring credible and comprehensive accountability for international crimes committed in Syria in order to bring about reconciliation and sustainable peace. The changes we witnessed in December constitute not only a pivotal moment for Syria and Syrians, but one for the world. At a time when impunity prevails in many situations where atrocities are committed and when the international legal order is under threat. The mass atrocities and human rights violations committed in Syria dominated headlines for years until they were overshadowed by other events, until it seemed that impunity had prevailed and justice had lost. For 14 years, despite the selfless and dedicated commitment of Syrians to document their suffering and demand accountability, hope for justice waned. One bright light was the will of member states to create the mechanism, and another was provided by those among you who, through universal jurisdiction, doggedly pursued accountability. Now, a new reality can give rise to the fulfillment of that hope. For these reasons, I am eager to hear from Excellency Mr. al-Shabani and from all of you in today's debate how we can address the situation in Syria together. At the mechanism, we are ready to play our part as a partner going forward. Mr. President, on the 21st of December 2024, exactly 8 years to the day the mechanisms was created, my team and I conducted for the very first time a visit to Syria. This initial diplomatic engagement started a constructive dialogue and exchange with the Syrian authorities, in particular with His Excellency Mr. al-Shabani and his team, which continues to this day. We are grateful for the warm and welcoming reception, for the expressed commitment to work with us for the designation of a focal point and for the ongoing dialogue. The mechanism requires permission from the authorities to operate in Syria. Our mandate is unique. To support criminal accountability efforts, our work must withstand the scrutiny of a criminal judicial process. This is the same approach we follow with all member states of the United Nations, in full respect of their sovereignty, whether regarding the collection and preservation of evidence or the conduct of witness interviews. During my visits, we observed massive volumes of documentation urgently in need of preservation, including the original Caesar files. They constitute evidence of the industrial scale of the use of torture of individuals whose abuse and ultimate deaths were documented to give them a veneer of legitimacy. We welcome the measures taken by the authorities to protect such data and to restrict and regulate access to sites that are holding valuable information and evidence which could help demonstrate the criminal liability of those individuals most responsible. We also welcome the plan to appoint a Transitional Justice Commission and a Missing Persons Commission to facilitate Syrian-led dialogue on existing and future justice opportunities. In this context, I would like to stress that the mechanism is coordinating closely with the Commission of Inquiry and the Independent Institution on Missing Persons, and I am particularly pleased that my colleagues, Commissioner Hani Megali and Assistant General Carla Quintana, are present here today. While we have separate mandates, they are mutually reinforcing and complementary. I'm personally grateful for the Commission's documentation and public reporting under difficult circumstances over the year, and I strongly welcome the creation of the Institution on Missing Persons, and we remain committed to assisting them in their work going forward. Mr. President, the mechanism was established to advance justice and accountability for the most serious crimes under international law. We are well placed to assess and preserve evidence, interview witnesses, and conduct analysis of the data, as well as other investigative activities that would directly support existing and future justice efforts. If of interest to the authorities and the international community, the mechanism could also offer recommendations, expertise, and best practice to support a review of the legal framework and the applicable criminal law standards. We would like to learn more from the Syrian authorities how we could best contribute and add value in accordance with our mandate and terms of reference. Subject to agreeing on a way forward consistent with those requirements and ensuring the necessary resources can be secured, the authorities and the mechanism could explore how to support and coordinate with all stakeholders the process of transitional justice. This could include considerations related to the digitizing of evidence, creating databases, advancing international judicial cooperation, facilitating the trainings of judiciary, aligning Syria's criminal code and other procedures with international standards, and developing systems for witness and victims support. Mr. President, for many years, comprehensive justice for Syria has been blocked. But the General Assembly did not give up on justice and created the mechanism to ensure readiness for accountability opportunities whenever and wherever they arose. We have been diligently carrying out this important mandate over the past 7 years, painstakingly constructing our central repository and conducting our structural investigation to create essential building blocks for justice. We developed an agile framework that allowed us to support many already existing opportunities, while still building foundations for the day when comprehensive justice would be a meaningful prospect. Despite serious resource constraints, the mechanism has made substantial progress across multiple fronts. In 2024 alone, we conducted 154 collection activities, expanding our central repository to 280 terabytes of data. This evidence has directly supported successful prosecutions and investigations in multiple jurisdictions and led to the arrest warrants for a number of perpetrators. To date, the mechanism has received a total of 466 requests for assistance from 16 jurisdictions related to 321 distinct investigations into crimes committed in Syria by a wide range of perpetrators. Notably, we supported the French investigations that led to arrest warrants for Bashar al-Assad and his brother Maher, along with 8 other senior officials for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Still in France, we also assisted the investigation that led to France's first convictions for crimes against humanity and war crimes committed in Syria. Ali Mamlouk, Jamil Hassan, and Abdul Salam Mahmoud were convicted in absentia to life imprisonment last May. In November, the mechanism's support to the investigation, a U.S. court charged Jamil Hassan and Abdul Salam Mahmoud for conspiracy to commit war crimes. The mechanism also contributed an analytical brief to a case against Syria for torture, which started in December before another U.S. court. The German judiciary has benefited from the mechanism's contribution to cases, which led to new conviction pronounced in December 2024, and is currently conducting 5 trials into crimes against humanity or war crimes committed in Syria with the active support of the mechanism. The mechanism also contributed to the judicial proceedings that led to the very first convictions for genocide committed in Syria by a Dutch court in December 2024 and a Swedish court in February 2025. We continue to support other trials scheduled for this year in France, Sweden, Germany, the Netherlands, and in additional countries that we cannot disclose at the moment. We continue to progress our structural investigation through the work we are doing on crimes by the Assad regime and by investigating crimes committed by ISIL or Daesh. Last summer, we finalized our comprehensive report on the recruitment and use of child soldiers by Daesh, a report that was shared with jurisdictions. We also continue our investigations into the unlawful attacks on the civilian population, including by the use of chemical weapons. In December 2024, for the first time, we publicly released a report, a redacted version of an analytical report, on the former regime's detention system. The report, based on over 300 witness interviews, forensic medical evidence, government documentation, an expert report, and other evidence, demonstrates patterns of torture, ill treatment, and related violations across more than 100 government facilities of the former regime. Completion of an Arabic version of the report is underway. The unredacted version of the report has also been made available to the proceedings before the International Court of Justice in the proceedings initiated by the Netherlands and Canada concerning Syria's obligations under the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment. At the heart of each document, of each testimony, each analysis are people. Many lost, many who have survived, each with a right to justice. We remain committed to our victim-survivor-centered approach, and recent efforts, including review of our gender strategy to further address the specific challenges faced by women detainees, highlighted in our detention report, to implement our strategy on children and youth, and to initiate further external consultations on the strategy with experts from across the UN system and NGOs, and to the tagging of information related to the missing persons in our systems, helping to clarify the fate of those thousands who have disappeared during the conflict. Mr. President, our resource situation was already challenging before the events of December 2024 and the additional constraints faced by the United Nations today. Our regular budget has not increased since 2020, despite our growing workload and the changed realities in Syria. We are facing a funding gap of $7.5 million for 2025, which may increase once we better understand the situation in Syria and have clarity on the extent to which we can conduct operations there in furtherance of our mandate. In 2024, we had to cut 18 positions, affecting our work. Investigations slowed down, assistance was delayed, and some justice opportunities were missed. We call on states to support our work by ensuring that we have a sustainable budget that duly responds to the demands we face. We encourage states to consider making voluntary contribution, ideally multi-year commitments, so we can maintain our level of support and react expeditiously when new opportunities arise, including operations in Syria in accordance with permission by the authorities. Mr. President, the mechanism has been mandated to work with existing and future jurisdictions that operate in accordance with international criminal law standards and best practices and policies of the United Nations. The transitional justice process must be an inclusive one, led and owned by Syrians. They must define what justice means for them, whether at the national, regional, or international level. And the mechanism is committed to cooperate. While Syrian-led and Syrian-owned, such effort could and should be supported by the international community. We have learned how to address situations of mass atrocities, from Rwanda to former Yugoslavia, from Cambodia to Liberia. None of these processes were perfect, each a response to their own unique and complex challenges. They cannot and must not be seen as a blueprint for Syria, but can help pave the way forward. We must all recognize the enormity of the challenges now facing the authorities in Syria, and the stark reality that the needs of the living must be addressed as a priority. It would be futile and indeed self-defeating not to recognize that accountability can only occur if it is part of a holistic response to these concrete challenges. The support of the international community must therefore be comprehensive and responsive to Syria's needs and priorities. However, as His Excellency Minister Shabani himself told me, victims must believe that there is hope for justice. Otherwise, violence may appear to be the only remedy. In turn, such violence may well threaten the fragile state of the country, directly affecting those in Syria and those who may consider returning. The mechanism stands by to contribute. Justice in Syria is no longer an abstract aspiration and a distinct political goal. It is a concrete opportunity. Let us not lose this momentum, but seize it fully. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the head of the mechanism. I will now make a statement. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I begin by welcoming Mr. Robert Petty, head of the International, Impartial and Independent Mechanism. I thank him for briefing the General Assembly. Let us acknowledge that this briefing takes place against a completely new background in Syria. 14 years of brutal conflict and violence in Syria has come to an end. The toll has been immense. Gross violations of human rights were committed. Hundreds of thousands of lives were lost. More than 14 million Syrians have been forced to flee their homes in search for safety. The scale of destruction across the country, including to historical heritage sites, has been immense. It is now a new era in Syria. Syrians now face the task of establishing a stable, peaceful, and inclusive future for everyone. All Syrians must work together to restore peace, rebuild institutions, and promote inclusive development. The human rights and dignity of all Syrians, regardless of their ethnicity, religion, political affiliation, or gender, must be respected and upheld. This transition will not be easy. While the moment holds promise, it also demands caution. To move forward, we must support efforts grounded in inclusivity, justice, and reconciliation. Without accountability for the most serious crimes under international law committed in Syria, it will not be possible to ensure long-term stability, peace, and security. Those responsible for human rights violations must be held accountable. This must extend to violations committed from March 2011 through December 2024 and to those committed subsequently. As Syrians begin rebuilding, the support of the international community will be critical. This includes the support of the International, Impartial, and Independent Mechanism. Established by the General Assembly, the mechanism plays a vital role in collecting, preserving, and analyzing evidence of the most serious crimes committed in Syria since 2011. This work remains indispensable to ensuring accountability and laying the groundwork for justice, reconciliation in Syria's future. We must match words with action through sustained engagement, coordinated assistance, and constructive diplomacy. Syria's sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity must be protected and respected by all. We must remain focused and committed as Syrians take steps toward a more just, secure, and united future. Thank you. I now give the floor to His Excellency Asad al-Shabaini, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of the Syrian Arab Republic.
أصحاب السعادة، أعضاء الجمعية العامة للأمم المتحدة، يشرفني أن أوجه حديثي لكم اليوم في أول اجتماع تعقده الجمعية حول سوريا بعد سقوط نظام الأسد. حرصت أن أكون بينكم شخصياً لأعبر عن تقديري العميق.
I wanted to be here personally to convey to you how much I appreciate how much the General Assembly has done for Syria down the years. that's all the more important given that divisions within the Security Council prevented the Council from adopting resolutions on Syria, and the General Assembly shouldered that major responsibility. Your commitment today is what has contributed to the establishment of the unprecedented UN mechanisms, such as the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism. That mechanism has kept Syria and the Syrian people in the minds of the world's peoples. You've condemned the Assad regime's crimes, and you ensured that the world hasn't turned its back on our people. However, the role of the United Nations in Syria throughout recent years has been marked by hesitation and the inability to really keep pace with the scope of the humanitarian and political crisis. The UN has not been able to impose binding resolutions for the protection of civilians. Neither has it been able to forge ahead with a serious, credible political process. The UN has simply managed crises rather than resolving the conflict. Moreover, competition between states has weakened a number of UN initiatives, particularly in the humanitarian sector, and has undermined its impartiality and effectiveness. Today, in this meeting devoted to the prevention of armed conflicts, Syria stands as a witness to the destructive costs of war. We are clear evidence of the urgent need for collective action to prevent violence from recurring today, tomorrow, and forevermore. Today, we welcome the report of the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism. We believe it to be a key component of the process of accountability in Syria. Without accountability, we are unable to prevent future conflicts. I thank you, Mr. Petit, for your enlightening briefing and for your recent visit to Damascus. We held credible, constructive, genuine discussions. These will continue until our joint cooperation reaches fruition. We have learned in Syria that avoiding armed conflict is impossible without accountability. We've learned that accountability is not simply limited to courts or judges. It stands as an integral part of a national framework for transitional justice. A framework which strives for reconciliation, redress, and seeks to make real efforts to heal wounds and meet the legal needs and needs of truth of the people, so that these new needs don't smoulder into a feeling of injustice, which once again plunges the country into violence. Despite all of the above, and given the complicated nature and the interconnected nature of Syrian crimes down various generations, we do admit the importance of forging ahead, but we do underscore the need to undertake this process in a properly thought out way, and in a way that involves everyone, all victims and all survivors, so that this process can be constructive and sustainable, and so that it does not produce unproductive results. In our view, the International Independent Mechanism and other stakeholders must stand within a broader transitional justice system, a system that doesn't seek to only deal with the crimes of the past, but also lays the foundation for justice and stability and real reconciliation, so that our children and our grandchildren can enjoy a future of peace and prosperity. As we walk towards this new stage of our journey, we must say that that journey has been long and arduous. For more than 45 years, Syria has suffered under the yoke of repression and oppression. For years and years, the voice of the people have been quelled, their dreams have been killed and their aspirations choked. That has torn our collective memory and rooted in us deep senses of injustices, which have only worsened over time. This sense of injustice has exploded in the form of major demonstrations throughout the country. That happened in 2011, and those events were the results of decades of repression and injustice. There were atrocities that were committed in the 1980s that haven't yet been faced up to or dealt with, and that's producing these movements that was producing these movements in 2011. Failing to face up to the crimes of the past, either nationally or internationally, paved the way to the conflict and allows conflict in general to grow. In Syria's case, that led to 14 years of brutal repression and war. We in the new Syrian government are and have fully committed to transitional justice, not only to ensure there is accountability for the sins of the past, but also in order to build a system which allows us to prevent conflicts in the future before they erupt. In order to achieve those lofty goals, we are about to establish an authority for transitional justice, and another authority will be established too. That to pinpoint the whereabouts or fate of missing persons, and will do that in line with international mechanisms. There are structural factors which could once again push Syria into a spiral of violence if they're not immediately nipped in the bud. Poverty, food insecurity, destruction of livelihoods, these are all components which together create an enabling environment for criminal activities to spread. They also fuel extremism and make it more likely that armed conflicts will recur. Allow me to put it more simply. When people lose their homes, their jobs, their hopes in terms of rebuilding their lives, war becomes an almost unavoidable, inevitable tragedy. So preventing conflicts does not only involve transitional justice, it also involves lending new momentum to our economy and reconstruction. Against this backdrop, unfortunately, sanctions, obsolete sanctions imposed during Assad's time, weaken the country's ability to prevent future conflicts. These are sanctions which no longer target those responsible for instability, but rather they hinder our ability to lay the necessary foundations to achieve a lasting peace. These sanctions were imposed to weaken the Assad regime, but following the fall of that regime, continuing to leave these sanctions in place only hampers Syria's economic resurgence, and they hinder the work of the new government. Without the ability to create jobs, to engage in reconstruction, to provide essential services, Syria remains vulnerable to dangers. It remains vulnerable to once again being plunged in the cycle of armed conflicts. Such an armed conflict will not have ideological or political motives, but rather it will be the expression of economic disenchantment, quite simply. Those that insist on imposing sanctions today are only simply themselves worsening the injustices of the past. Continuing to leave sanctions in place hinders the state's ability to pay wages, to transfer funds, to finance transitional justice programs. Sanctions also hinder the work of civil society organizations to establish themselves in Syria or to transfer the necessary funds to their employees within Syrian territory. Leaving sanctions in place also chokes legitimate trade and paves the way for the spread of criminal gangs, illicit trading networks, and extremist groups. If our common goal is to prevent conflicts, we must immediately remove all obstacles which undermine Syria's stability. On behalf of Syria's people, we beseech this August Assembly to heed our request. Lift all sanctions imposed during the Assad regime. Please do that now without delay. Keeping these sanctions in place will only worsen the suffering of the Syrian people and worsen the economic crisis and allow violence and conflicts to spiral. Ladies and gentlemen, Syria is at a decisive crossroads. We have taken major strides towards stability. We've freed political prisoners that suffered so much in the Assad regime's prisons. We have preserved the state's institutions. We have engaged in national dialogues. We've opened up our country in an unprecedented way. We've opened it up to human rights mechanisms at a UN level. These include the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism, and the fact-finding mission. We've also worked with the OPCW to deal with remaining issues regarding the chemical programs of the fallen regime. We've also formed an inclusive government. We've united the armed factions in a united national army. We have reached historic agreements with the Kurds to prevent any conflict in the future. And when violence erupted in the coastal regions, as a result of the work of the remaining components of the sectarian regime, we responded immediately by establishing a committee for civic peace, and we also trained inquiry teams. All of that was acknowledged by the Human Rights Council. We've done everything we can to prevent conflict. However, ladies and gentlemen, without real support for our economy and our political process to avoid, in terms of avoiding new tensions, our efforts may be imperiled as a result of factors beyond our control. Dear colleagues, there's another threat lying in wait for Syria's stability, namely continued aggression and attacks targeting our sovereignty. We have clearly explained that the new Syria will not be a source of instability for any regional neighbour, including Israel. However, repeated military aggressions on Syrian territory constitute a direct threat to our regional security and undermine our efforts to achieve stability in our country. These attacks may also fuel new acts of injustice and feelings of injustice which can worsen and produce new conflicts. Air raids and incursions are flagrant violations of international law. They threaten stability not only in Syria but throughout the region. Moreover, we urge this august assembly to tackle this threat before it leads to greater instability in the long term. By way of conclusion, I wish to recall that those who, in the darkest hours of Syria's history, stood shoulder to shoulder with it, you, as representatives of the international community, were the party who stood on the side of justice when you stood with shoulder, despite the fact that the truth was concealed. We want you to accompany us into the future, not just towards justice, but in our permanent endeavours to produce peace and prevent conflicts. Please lift the unilateral sanctions that have become outdated and obsolete. Syria must make its own decisions about its future through stability and reconciliation. There must be no return to conflict in our territory or any others. Preventing conflict requires international support and comprehensive cooperation. There needs to be a genuine conviction that Syria is stable and serves everybody's interest. Let us work together to open a new chapter for Syria, a chapter of peace, prosperity and stability. A chapter in which war will never re-emerge. Let us work together to create a future and heal the wounds of the past and leave sanctions behind so we can usher in our future. Thank you.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of the Syrian Arab Republic. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the European Union, who will speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. The candidate countries North Macedonia, Montenegro, Ukraine, the Republic of Moldova, Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as Monaco and San Marino, aligned themselves with this statement. We welcome today's important debate on the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism for Syria, which underscores the continued commitment of UN member states to ensuring justice for the most serious crimes committed in Syria. We would like to thank the head of the mechanism, Mr. Petit, for his leadership since assuming his position in May 2024 and for the 11th report to the General Assembly. This debate comes at a historic moment for Syria. As also stated in the report, and as we just heard, following the end of the Bashar al-Assad rules in December 2024, we are witnessing a unique opportunity to deliver on our collective commitment to comprehensive justice and accountability, which are core conditions for sustainable peace and reconciliation in Syria. The report highlights significant positive developments, including the mechanism's first visit to Damascus in December 2024, and its constructive initial engagement with the caretaker authorities. We call on the Syrian transitional government to formally authorize the mechanisms to start operating in Syria in accordance with its mandate. This would be a crucial step toward maximizing the mechanism operational work, including for preserving vital evidence at risk of loss or destruction. We commend the mechanism's comprehensive work, including its detailed report on torture and ill treatment in detention facilities under the Assad regime, which was published in December 2024. We also know the significant progress made in investigations related to the ISIL crimes, notably the report on the recruitment, training, and use by ISIL of children in hostilities in Syria, as well as the progress in the inquiry on unlawful attacks, including chemical weapons use. We also commend the important work of the mechanisms to collect, preserve, and process the increasing amount of evidence through improved processes and innovative use of digital technology. These efforts ensure that crucial evidence is maintained with the highest standard of integrity for current and future accountability process. We reiterate our support to the mechanism victim-survivor-centered approach and its commitment to inclusive justice through the implementation of the thematic strategies on gender equality and analysis, children and youth, and broader justice objectives. The experiences and perspective of all victims and survivors must be at the heart of accountability efforts. We particularly commend the mechanism for its positive performance in relation to the action plan on gender equality and the empowerment of women. The mechanism continues to play an indispensable role in supporting accountability efforts. The continued increase in the request speaks to the valuable role the mechanism plays in the pursuit of accountability. We welcome the continued successful prosecutions in multiple jurisdictions, including several EU member states, which have been supported by the mechanism work. In this regard, we urge all states to enhance cooperation and engagement with the mechanism, including by facilitating access to information and evidence and providing operational support for witness protection. Alongside these achievements, the report also highlights persistent challenges that require our attention. We are deeply concerned about the funding and resource limitations faced by the mechanism. Despite the General Assembly urging the Secretary General to include further resources to address the mechanism's increased workloads since 2020, there has been no increase in its regular budget resources, and the exhaustion of the trust fund in 2024 has led to staff cuttings and operational constraints, which affect the mechanism's capacity to fulfill its mandate effectively, particularly at this critical juncture. This is indeed rather the moment to step up our collective efforts. It is a crucial moment for Syria, and we must increase our support to the mechanism and to accountability mechanism in general, as fundamental elements of a successful transition. We thus call on all states to ensure support to the mechanism with increased funding through the regular budget and complementary voluntary contributions. We also reiterate the importance of referring the situation in Syria to International Criminal Court, and we reaffirm our support for the proceedings initiated by the Netherlands and Canada before the ICJ regarding breaches of the UN Convention Against Torture. Strongly condemning the widespread violence against civilians in Syria's coastal region last March, we welcome the commitments made by the Syrian transitional government, in particular, the establishment of an investigative committee in order to hold perpetrators accountable in line with international law norms and standards. We call for a swift, transparent, and impartial investigations into those horrific crimes against civilians, including summary killings, to ensure that perpetrators are brought to justice, to prevent such crimes from ever occurring, and to ensure that all Syrians, without distinction of any kind, can live without fear in the new Syria. We underline the importance of the protection of the rights of Syrians from all ethnic and religious backgrounds without discrimination. Mr. President, the fall of the Assad regime marks a historic moment and an opportunity for the Syrian people to decide the future of their country. In this critical period, the EU stands with the Syrian people, both within Syria and across the region. Since the beginning of the conflict in 2011, the EU and its member states have been the largest humanitarian donor to Syrians and have mobilized over 35.3 billion euro to help Syria and its neighboring countries address the consequences of the war. To help reconstruction, the European Union has also recently suspended a number of restrictive measures. At the recent 9th Brussels conference, the EU gathered key regional and international partners together with the Syrian Arab Republic. On that occasion, we reaffirmed our support for a peaceful, inclusive, Syrian-led and Syrian-owned transition, where both domestic and international affairs are conducted in full respect of international law and with justice, reconciliation and reconstruction as fundamental elements. We will thus remain at the forefront of the fight against impunity in Syria, supporting efforts to gather and preserve evidence of atrocities, regardless of who may have committed them. We will continue to support the mechanism, as well as the work of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry and the OPCW Investigation and Identification Team, and we welcome the cooperation among these complementary actors. We also support the Independent Institution on Missing Persons in Syria. In conclusion, this critical moment for Syria requires unwavering international support for accountability and justice mechanism. The mandate of the mechanism has never been more important. We must ensure it has the resources and cooperation necessary to fulfill its vital role in laying the foundation for comprehensive accountability. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the European Union. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Finland, who will speak on behalf of the Nordic Baltic countries.
Mr. President, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the 8 Nordic Baltic countries, Denmark, Estonia, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Norway, Sweden, and my own country, Finland. Mr. President, first of all, we want to express our full support to creating a stable, democratic, inclusive, and prosperous Syria. Since the end of the al-Assad rule in December 2024, there is a unique opportunity to promote justice and truth for the many people that have lost their loved ones, and to ensure accountability for the most serious crimes committed in Syria in one of the bloodiest armed conflicts in recent history. The fall of Assad regime marks a pivotal moment to the Syrian people to shape the future of their country. We stand with the Syrian people and reaffirm our commitment to support a Syrian-owned, Syrian-led, inclusive transition. After 14 years of brutal civil war marked with wide-scale atrocities, human rights violations, and abuses against the people in Syria, the opportunity for justice must be seized. Accountability for serious violations of international law, including war crimes and crimes against humanity, is a precondition for sustainable peace and development. Perpetrators of atrocity crimes must be brought to justice, not only to ensure justice for victims, but also to prevent and deter future violations. Mr. President, we warmly welcome the transitional government's facilitation of the timely visit of the head of the mechanism, Mr. Robert Petit, to Syria in December 2024 to ensure cooperation with the new authorities and civil society representatives, and to emphasize the importance of preserving evidence. We commend the determined efforts of Mr. Robert Petit and the mechanism as shown in the 11th report presented to the General Assembly today on the investigation of the most serious crimes committed in Syria. Since its creation in 2016, the mechanism has been documenting, monitoring, and publishing reports on abuses and violations. Their work stands as a beacon of hope for justice and accountability in the region. The meticulous documentation and cooperation with national and international judicial bodies underscore the unwavering commitment to upholding the principles of international law and the fight against impunity. Mr. President, the Nordic Baltic countries highly appreciate all the work undertaken by the mechanism. We welcome the mechanism's victim survivor-centered approach and its close cooperation with civil society. Both are vital to advancing inclusive justice and ensuring that the voices of those most affected are central to the process. We remain active supporters of the mechanism. We welcome the preparations for a cooperation framework with the Syrian Arab Republic to deploy and conduct operations in the country, including the decision to deploy a liaison officer and efforts to open a field office in Damascus. We trust the Syrian transitional government will enable the mechanism to operate in Syria in accordance with its mandate. The Nordic Baltic countries welcome the efforts undertaken by many states to close the accountability gap in Syria through their national jurisdictions. The international community should work together towards a longer-term and holistic solution to bring justice for victims. The mechanism was created to achieve these aims, not alone. We call on all states to cooperate with the mechanism in information sharing and to provide it with the necessary operational support. We also encourage the Syrian authorities to take strong action in pursuing accountability for the crimes committed during the Assad regime, including holding al-Assad accountable. We encourage the Syrian Arab Republic to accept the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. The establishment of the mechanism by the General Assembly in 2016 is an important reminder of the power of the Assembly to step in when the Security Council is unable or unwilling to act. The General Assembly must be ready to fill the gap created by the use of the veto in line with the veto initiative. The Nordic Baltic countries remain convinced that sustainable and predictable resources for the mechanism can only be guaranteed through adequate funding from the UN regular budget. Voluntary funding is also necessary but cannot replace assessed contributions. We call on all member states to ensure that the mechanism has the necessary resources to carry out its vitally important mandate. Mr. President, the magnitude of the atrocities in Syria under the Assad regime has shocked us over the course of a decade and has served as a painful example of the limits of international justice. It is imperative that we change that. Syria should not be a symbol of impunity any longer. We should seize the historic opportunity to work together and stand united in our pursuit of justice. Let us honor the victims by ensuring that those responsible for the most serious crimes in Syria are held accountable. Together, we can make a difference and extend our support for building a peaceful and prosperous future for Syria, grounded in accountability and international law. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Finland. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Kingdom of Netherlands on behalf of the Benelux countries.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Benelux countries align with the statement delivered by the European Union. And on behalf of the Benelux countries, Belgium, Luxembourg, and my own country, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, I would like to express sincere gratitude to Mr. Robert Petit and his team for the comprehensive report on the activities, priorities, and the progress made by the International, Impartial and Independent Mechanism for Syria, the IIIM, and for the submission of their annual report to the General Assembly. It comes at a pivotal moment. We would also like to welcome the engagement between the IIIM and the Syrian authorities. We have witnessed with great relief the fall of the Assad regime, and we understand that there are many different priorities that now have to be taken into account in the path to lasting peace. While this change in leadership offers a new perspective for Syria and the Syrian people, we mustn't forget the crimes of the past. We stand ready to support the Syrian interim authorities at their quest for justice and reconciliation. The Benelux countries welcome the establishment of a transitional justice commission, and the Benelux countries, together with our partners in the international community, remain steadfast in our commitment to accountability and transitional justice as prerequisites for political stability and sustainable peace. In that context, we are deeply concerned about reports of ongoing violence in various regions of Syria, most notably in the coastal region of Syria in early March. Perpetrators must be held accountable in accordance with international norms and standards. The Benelux countries emphasize the importance of continuing national and international efforts to ensure accountability for the atrocities committed by the Assad regime. An example of international efforts is when in 2022 the Kingdom of the Netherlands, joined by Canada, invoked Syria's responsibility for human rights violation under international law for breaches of the UN Convention on Torture. We welcome the visit of the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to Damascus earlier this year and his discussion with the interim authorities on the fight against impunity. The work of the IIIM is as crucial as ever in ensuring that justice is served, by means of, amongst others, the significant collaboration with the Syrian civil society organizations. The IIIM has proven to be an entity that ensures the most serious crimes committed in Syria are not forgotten and do not go unpunished. The Benelux countries would also like to commend the cooperation between the IIIM and the Independent Institution on Missing Persons in the Syrian Arab Republic. We support the decision by the heads of both institutions, together with the Commission of Inquiry, to cooperate and avoid duplication of work, including through the sharing of information held by the IIIM with the IIMP. I would like to reiterate that we fully support the positive engagement between the Syrian interim authorities and the IIIM so far, and wish for this constructive collaboration to continue and further materialize in the future. Mr. President, the Benelux countries have been a proud supporter of the IIIM since its inception. We will continue to call on all states to cooperate with and support the IIIM to ensure that evidence of serious crimes is collected, analyzed, and preserved for future prosecutions. If there ever was a time to do so, it is now. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kuwait on behalf of the Gulf Cooperation Council.
In the name of God, the Merciful, the Compassionate, Mr. President, allow me at the outset to welcome His Excellency Mr. Asad Hassan al-Shaybani, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of the sisterly Syrian Arab Republic. We wish him all the success in his work. Allow me also to express our deepest appreciation to Mr. Robert Petit, the head of the IIIM, for his efforts in preparing the 11th annual report before us today. It is my honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the member states of the GCC. Mr. President, GCC countries stress the importance and vitality of comprehensive transitional justice in achieving national reconciliation and preventing armed conflicts. It provides an important way forward towards justice and the prevention of such violations in the future. In this vein, despite good regional and international initiatives seeking to provide a conducive environment to address such violations, we stress that comprehensive transitional justice in Syria cannot be achieved without meeting the needs and aspirations of the Syrian people, without providing all forms of humanitarian and economic support, without building the capacities of the Syrian state, especially in light of the deteriorating situation in Syria, dangerously affecting the humanitarian response. A 30% decrease in the staff of UNHCR is expected in Syria. It is also expected that 50% of its 122 social centers are at risk of closing by next summer. A number of NGOs, especially in northeast Syria, is expected to face a severe funding shortage, threatening the closure of hospitals serving more than 200,000 Syrians in Deir ez-Zor. 170 health facilities will lose their funding in northwest Syria by the end of next month. Hence, the urgent need for further support to Syria. Mr. President, we stress that the continuation of sanctions on Syria impedes the aspirations of the Syrian people in achieving development, reconstruction, and stability. We once again call for economically empowering Syria and lifting sanctions. We also call upon all partners and relevant organizations and states to provide all forms of support to the brotherly Syrian people. We stress that our states in the GCC will continue to provide humanitarian assistance to Syria. We renew our welcoming of the steps taken to provide safety to civilians and to stem the bloodshed, as well as to achieve national reconciliation, preserve Syrian state institutions and resources. We also welcome the decision to dismantle militias and armed factions and place all weapons under state control. These are essential steps to preserve security and stability in Syria and to restore its regional role and international stance. In conclusion, Mr. President, we renew our support to regional and international efforts to promote security and stability and to preserve Syria's sovereignty and unity in order to achieve the aspirations of the Syrian people and to establish a more stable and prosperous Syria. We stress the need to fully commit to the principle of sovereign equality among states, respect of purposes of international law, especially the international humanitarian law and the international human rights law. We call for anchoring the principle of accountability in any national reconciliation process. The international community today has a historic opportunity to decisively break the vicious cycle of violence once and for all in the Syrian Arab Republic and in every other armed conflict. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Kuwait. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Costa Rica.
Señor Presidente.
Mr. President, Costa Rica welcomes the mechanism's 11th report. We thank Mr. Robert Petit and his distinguished team for their meticulous and arduous work over the past year. The fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime has opened a new chapter of justice for a people who has suffered too much. The historic visit of the head of the mechanism to Damascus in December 2024 stands as an unprecedented opportunity in the fight against impunity and strengthens the prospect for effective accountability for all of the most serious violations of international law that have occurred on Syrian territory. At this turning point in Syria's history, allow me to offer some thoughts on the past, present, and future of the mechanism. The mechanism's legacy is already written in the indelible ink of justice. Over the past decade, its meticulous compilation and classification work has allowed courts in 16 jurisdictions around the world to prosecute crimes of torture, war crimes, and crimes against humanity perpetrated in Syria. Particularly significant judicial progress has been made in a relevant number of states. Each compiled criminal file represents not only judicial evidence, but also the possibility of truth for those who have lost everything except their right to justice. We note with hope the openness shown by the interim authorities of the Syrian Republic so far. Costa Rica vehemently appeals to the interim authorities of the Syrian Arab Republic to maintain and deepen their dialogue with the mechanism and to facilitate its work on Syrian territory to obtain, record, and preserve evidence in all cases of mass human rights violations, and massive human rights violations indeed. This meticulous documentation process lays the foundation for a future of reconciliation. The compilation of data and testimonies directly benefits victims and their families. It provides them with a path to justice, the justice they so richly deserve. Likewise, this body of evidence strengthens the work of international tribunals in the manifold open cases around the world. For this vital work to continue uninterrupted, Costa Rica makes an urgent appeal to you. The financial future of the mechanism must be guaranteed without delay. It is essential to provide the necessary funds for this critical work, especially in order to establish a permanent office in Damascus to facilitate the mechanism's operations and to allow for the collection and digitization of evidence before time irretrievably destroys it. This is not an optional investment. It is a moral, legal, and practical imperative that cannot be ignored or postponed if we are faithfully committed to justice. Costa Rica also welcomes the mechanism's coordination with civil society organizations and with other agencies of the UN system, particularly the Independent Institution on Missing Persons in the Syrian Arab Republic. That is headed by Ms. Carla Quintana. She will bring to the Syrian people the invaluable experience of our Latin American region, experience that is on the painful path of clarifying enforced disappearances and shedding light on them. Mr. President, since the creation of the mechanism, Costa Rica has reiterated its unwavering commitment to the fight against impunity. The atrocities perpetuated in Syria since 2011 cannot and must not go unpunished. Victims and their families not only deserve justice, they deserve the dignity of healing the wounds opened by years of unspeakable suffering. Every documented testimony, every piece of evidence preserved, represents a step towards healing a fractured nation. The Syrian people have the inalienable right to write a new chapter in their history, a genuine process of national reconciliation, a future in which sustainable peace, comprehensive justice, and inclusive progress are not mere aspirations, but everyday realities. Costa Rica's support for the mechanism transcends diplomacy. It embodies our deepest held conviction that justice is not a luxury that can be postponed. Rather, it is the fundamental foundation upon which any lasting peace must be built. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Costa Rica. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Qatar.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to welcome His Excellency Mr. Asad Hassan al-Shibani, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Syrian Arab Republic. We thank His Excellency for his important participation in today's session, which reflects the interest of the Syrian government in effectively cooperating with the UN and the international community. We also thank Mr. Robert Petit, head of the mechanism, for presenting the 11th report. We express our appreciation to him and his team for their valuable efforts. We also associate ourselves with the statement of Kuwait on behalf of the GCC countries. Mr. President, the prevention of armed conflict is a key pillar of the foreign policy of the State of Qatar, which we seek to achieve through various international efforts, whether through mediation or preventive diplomacy, or by supporting justice and accountability. In this context, the State of Qatar has played a pioneering role alongside the Principality of Liechtenstein in the efforts that led to the establishment of the international mechanism pursuant to the GA Resolution 71/248. The independent mechanism is today of particular importance as a key entity supporting and strengthening accountability efforts in the sisterly Syrian Arab Republic. We welcome the report's reference to the mechanism's response to positive developments in Syria, including through the December field visit to Syria, which is its first visit 8 years after its establishment, and the positive engagement and constructive discussions. In this regard, we commend the responsiveness of the Syrian government and its constructive cooperation with the mechanism as part of the government's commitment to justice and accountability, which facilitates the mechanism's performance of its mandate. Furthermore, the Syrian government has taken practical and concrete steps to engage and cooperate with various international and UN bodies, thus demonstrating the desire to play a positive role at various levels to ensure security, stability, and human rights. Mr. President, we welcome the progress made by the mechanism in implementing a strategic plan, in particular the strengthening of its ability to handle, process, and analyze large amounts of complex information and evidence within the framework of strategic investigations. We welcome the priority given to ensuring data integrity and accuracy. We welcome the ongoing interaction with the civil society and various relevant actors to support the conservation, collection, and analysis activities. We also welcome the cooperation with relevant international bodies, in particular the OPCW, and the utilization of the archives of the UN Mission of Investigation into the alleged use of chemical weapons in Syria, and the engagement with the International Independent Investigation Commission and the Independent Institution on Missing Persons. We commend the mechanism's reaffirming of its commitment to comprehensive justice for all. In conclusion, we reaffirm the commitment of the State of Qatar to continue supporting the mechanism out of our commitment to the principles of accountability and ending impunity for core international crimes and violations of international law. We also reaffirm our support to the Syrian government and the broaderly Syrian people to achieve their aspirations for justice, the rule of law, reconciliation, stability, and sustainable peace. I thank you, President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Qatar, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Liechtenstein.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, when I introduced from this podium in December 2016 the proposal for the creation of what quickly became known as the IIIM, this proposal met with fierce resistance from the then delegation of the Syrian Arab Republic and a small number of other delegations, notably the Russian Federation, already at that time, and even more so in the coming years, the political will in the membership to ensure accountability for the most serious crimes committed in Syria prevailed. The mechanism was established with success and considerable practical effectiveness, and its financing was soon moved to the regular budget of the United Nations. Today, we are witnessing for the first time the support from Syria expressed by Foreign Minister al-Shibani, a truly historic moment for this assembly, for the people of Syria, but also for the cause of justice. Seeing this expression of support for the rule of law is truly gratifying and could not be more timely. Mr. President, we have witnessed long years of mass atrocities and the commission of the most serious crimes in Syria. Hundreds of thousands of civilians have been killed. Millions have fled their homes in search of safety, and countless families are left in the devastating uncertainty of not knowing the fate of their missing loved ones. We support in this respect the work of the International Mechanism for Missing Persons and welcome the presence of the head of the mechanism, Carla Quintana, in this room today. We welcome the end to the regime of Bashar al-Assad in late December 2024, whose rule brought untold suffering to Syria and its people. In this significant moment of change, we once again emphasize the right of the Syrian people to live in peace and in freedom in a country that is governed by them and for them. A sustainable peace in Syria must be achieved through a Syrian-owned, UN-supported process rooted in inclusivity and diversity. Preserving Syria's territorial integrity and its rich cultural legacy are key components for long-lasting peace, which entails the protection of the rights of all minorities and the meaningful participation of women at all levels of decision-making, reflecting the full diversity of Syrian society. Mr. President, to support a future of justice, reconciliation and freedom for Syria, accountability for the most serious crimes is crucial in this time of transition. The end of the Assad regime offers a unique window of opportunity to advance justice and fulfill our joint commitment to comprehensive accountability. The IIIM, along with the other accountability mechanisms, plays a crucial role in a rapidly evolving context where there is a high risk that evidence may be destroyed and opportunities for justice lost. We must seize this moment when justice is not only necessary, but finally possible in ways it has not been for many years, but also to express support for the authorities in Syria by considering the gradual lifting of sanctions that are still in place. We welcome the recent collaborative efforts by the Syrian authorities towards ensuring a presence of the IIIM on the ground and encourage the prompt development of operational capacity. The IIIM has responded to an unprecedented demand from competent jurisdictions, building on investigative advancements to offer a growing range of services for criminal investigations and prosecutions. Liechtenstein commends the IIIM's work to date and thanks Mr. Robert Petit for his very capable leadership. Mr. President, recognizing the importance of its work, we have contributed $150,000 in voluntary funding to the IIIM in late 2024. We have done so due to the exceptional opportunity we are given, while we continue to ask that the needs of the mechanism are met from within the regular budget. The recent trajectory has been negative and forced the mechanism to scale back essential services, including declining requests for analytical products and witness engagement. We call on all member states to help close the significant funding gap to ensure the mechanism is placed in a stronger position to respond effectively to growing demands and to support meaningful progress towards accountability and lasting peace in Syria. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Liechtenstein, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Germany.
Thank you, Mr. President. Germany aligns itself with the statement delivered by the European Union. We sincerely thank the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism for Syria, IIIM, and its head, Mr. Robert Petit, for their continuous engagement and dedication to achieve justice and accountability for the most serious crimes committed in Syria. We are most grateful for your efforts in advancing the work of the IIIM and for the latest, the 11th report underlining the progress made. Our gratitude also extends to the newly established Syria Missing Persons Institution and its head, Ms. Carla Quintana. The end of the Assad regime provides an unprecedented chance for lasting change. Transitional justice and respect for human rights, including women's and children's rights, will be key to achieving sustainable peace and reconciliation in Syria. We continue to fully support a Syrian-led and Syrian-owned political transition process. The future of the country must lie in the hands of all Syrians, regardless of their ethnic background, religion, or gender. We strongly welcome Syria's constructive interaction with the IIIM and remain convinced that close cooperation of the mechanism with Syria can play a key role for a successful transitional justice process. Germany has been supporting the IIIM since its establishment, and thanks to the substantial contributions of the IIIM, Germany has been able to initiate criminal proceedings against members of the Assad regime for severe human rights violations under the principle of universal jurisdiction. We are highly appreciative and extremely thankful for the close cooperation between the IIIM and the German Federal Prosecutor General, and committed to continue working together on pending cases. Germany reiterates its firm political and financial support to the IIIM. We call on all member states to do the same and fully cooperate with the mechanism. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Germany. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Japan.
Mr. President, I'd like to extend my appreciation to Mr. Robert Petit for his first briefing as the head of the IIIM. The collapse of the Assad regime must be seen as an opportunity to build a society in which all Syrians can enjoy basic human rights and dignity, as well as freedom and prosperity, not as the beginning of the new round of turmoil and tragedy. We strongly urge all parties to immediately cease violence and comply with international law, including IHL. We are deeply concerned about the loss of many lives, including civilians, and deteriorating humanitarian situation. Japan urges all parties concerned to play a constructive role in promoting inclusive political solutions through dialogue among Syrian people. In view of the current situation in Syria, I'd like to make 3 points on IIIM. First, those responsible for serious crimes, including members of the Assad regime and ISIL, must be held accountable. It is not yet clear whether the new political situation in Syria will lead to a stronger commitment to and accountability for serious crimes, but without transitional justice, reconciliation cannot be achieved, nor can true national harmony be realized. Therefore, the role of IIIM in collecting and preserving evidence is now more important than ever. Second, we welcome the IIIM took swift action after the political change and was able to enter Damascus for the first time and hold consultations with the interim authority. We strongly expect the authority to promptly grant official permission for its activities. The IIIM cannot fulfill its mission without cooperation from the local population, including victims and civil society, and we hope that IIIM can continue to take victim-centered approach. Third, while recognizing the high expectations for the IIIM, we also need to address the financial challenges facing the entire UN system. In this regard, it is strongly recommended that duplication of the IIIM's work with broader accountability mechanisms be avoided. In this regard, we welcome the effort of the IIIM to collaborate with Independent International Commission of Inquiry and the Independent Institution of Missing Persons, and we expect continued efforts to improve overall efficiency. In closing, Japan will continue to support relevant initiatives to achieve sustainable peace through a comprehensive and inclusive political process in Syria, in line with Security Council Resolution 2254. Japan has consistently supported the Syrian people and will continue to provide assistance tailored to their needs. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Japan. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, ASG Robert Petit, for the briefing and the debate today. Let me also welcome Foreign Minister Al-Shabani to the Assembly. Your presence here today is a powerful signal of the opportunities that lie ahead for Syria to carve out a more secure, peaceful and prosperous future. I will make 3 points today. First, we welcome progress in Syria's political transition since the fall of the Assad regime. This includes the formation of a new Syrian government and their commitment to hold free and fair elections in Syria. We also welcome the important steps taken since December towards social cohesion amongst the Syrian people. This includes the first ever consensus on the Human Rights Council resolution supported by the Syrian government and commitments by the Syrian government to establish national committees to address transitional justice, missing persons and chemical weapons. However, as the horrific events in the coastal areas in March remind us, significant challenges remain to address the legacy of 14 years of war and brutality and to begin the process to provide closure to all those affected. Second, we commend the IIIM for the valuable progress it has made since December on the international pursuit for accountability. The volume of documentation and witness interviews that the IIIM team have collated is a testament to your tireless dedication to provide a credible evidence base for future prosecutions. The appointment of a IIIM liaison officer in Damascus is also a promising example of UN-Syria cooperation, and we urge all parties to work collaboratively to ensure that the survivors receive justice that they demand and that they deserve. Third, the United Kingdom had a leading role supporting international and civil society accountability efforts during the Assad regime, and we remain committed to pursuing accountability for victims, survivors and families in Syria. And for that reason, we continue to see the IIIM as a crucial component for future Syrian-led transitional justice processes. We were proud to have co-sponsored the UNGA resolution which established this mechanism in 2016 and remain committed to ensuring that it has the political backing and operational remit it requires to succeed. And this year the United Kingdom has allocated a further $940,000 in funding to our partners in support of these effective evidence collection and preservation. We thank the IIIM for your contribution to the fight against impunity and for amplifying the voices of survivors throughout your work. The United Kingdom will continue to support the Syrian government and its peoples in their efforts on reconciliation and accountability to ensure a stable and prosperous future for the people of Syria. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ireland.
Thank you, President. Ireland aligns with the statement of the European Union and adds the following. Ireland thanks Mr. Pettit, head of the mechanism, for his informative briefing today and for his leadership since assuming his position in May last year. This debate comes at a historic moment for Syria. Ireland welcomes the fall of the al-Assad regime and the steps taken so far by the transitional authorities towards an inclusive transition process, including agreements with the Kurdish and Druze communities, signing of an interim constitution, announcement of a transitional government. We welcome too the outcome of the 9th Brussels conference, which saw pledges of €5.8 billion in humanitarian assistance to support Syria's recovery. Ireland will continue to support the Syrian people and is pleased to have pledged €21.8 million this year. President, Ireland will also continue to support efforts on accountability. For the first time since evidence began to emerge of atrocity crimes in Syria, there is now a real opportunity to ensure comprehensive justice and accountability. Ireland shares the commitment of the Secretary-General to help Syrians build a country where reconciliation, justice, freedom and prosperity are shared realities for all. Ireland commends the mechanism for its essential work in collecting evidence of international crimes committed in Syria. Despite the failure of the Security Council to progress accountability in Syria, the mechanism is playing an essential role by supporting investigations and prosecutions in national jurisdictions. We repeat our previous call for the UN Security Council to refer the situation in Syria to the International Criminal Court. Ireland welcomes the constructive initial engagement between the mechanism and the caretaker authorities and looks forward to further cooperation by the authorities with the mechanism. This ongoing cooperation could enhance the mechanism's operational work, including preservation of evidence in accordance with international standards, and also further support domestic accountability initiatives. The 11th report of the mechanism confirms that requests for assistance submitted to it have continued to increase, including since the end of the al-Assad rule in Syria in December last year. Ireland commends the way the mechanism has evolved to respond to this increasing demand and the important contribution that it is making to accountability. President, the conflict in Syria has caused immense hardship and suffering, acutely felt by women, children and older people. Ireland reiterates our support for the mechanism's commitment to a victim-survivor-centred approach, placing the experiences and perspectives of all victims and survivors at the heart of accountability efforts. We further welcome the mechanism's commitment to effective dialogue and cooperation with civil society actors who make critical contributions across the full scope of its work. We continue to support adequate funding of the mechanism through the UN regular budget. We strongly support the mechanism's request for increased funding to address its significantly increasing workload, including as a consequence of the recent change in government. An increase in resources is necessary to enable the mechanism to maintain its investigative and analytical work in accordance with its mandate, and in particular in light of the significant evidence-gathering opportunities now available in Syria. President, to conclude, Ireland remains committed to supporting efforts to ensure accountability for international crimes committed in Syria. Comprehensive transitional justice for victims and survivors is essential to reconciliation, to building a peaceful Syria, and reaching a genuine solution to the conflict in the spirit of Resolution 2254. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Ireland. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Austria.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Excellencies, Austria aligns itself with the statement of the European Union. Austria welcomes today's debate on the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism for Syria, and we thank Mr. Robert Petit and his team for the mechanism's 11th report. It is our firm belief that our international order must be based on international law, a fundamental pillar of which is accountability for the most serious crimes under international law. Without accountability, there can be no justice for victims and consequently no sustainable peace and reconciliation. And this is why the work of the IIIM is so important. We are witnessing major change in the Syrian Arab Republic following the end of the Assad rule. And we strongly welcome the visit of Foreign Minister al-Shaybani to New York and his exchange with many of our colleagues and ourselves today. This change in Syria provides a significant opportunity for the mechanism to step up its role in contributing to the accountability process now possible for Syria and in Syria for the first time in decades. The first visit of the mechanism to the Syrian Arab Republic in December 2024 was met with great expectations by victims and their families. And we share their hope and we share their expectations that the newly appointed government continues to its fruitful exchange with the mechanism. Practically spoken, the mechanism should formally be allowed to start operating in the Syrian Arab Republic in line with its mandate. And furthermore, we see merit in the establishment of a field office of IIIM in Damascus to maximize its operational work. Related to this, we welcome the recent consensual adoption of the mandate renewal of the Commission of Inquiry of the Human Rights Council with the support of the Syrian authorities. Ladies and gentlemen, Austria has a keen interest in a secure and stable environment for all Syrians within the country. As you may know, we are hosting a very large number of Syrian refugees in Austria, and we have therefore a very genuine engagement for a just, inclusive and peaceful future in mind, and our engagement for accountability is based on that. Up until now, the IIIM has made a substantial and useful contribution to the gathering of evidence and legal reconditioning for international crimes committed in the Syrian Arab Republic since March 2011. This work must go on, but considering latest developments, including massacres against civilians in the coastal region, it is clear that IIIM Syria must also have a forward-looking mandate. All crimes must be swiftly and transparently investigated and brought to justice. In this regard, we take good note of the efforts of the caretaker government to establish an investigative committee, as well as the Minister has explained today, its recent extension, and we hope that this committee will also cooperate with the Commission of Inquiry of the Human Rights Council. Mr. President, Austria has been a strong supporter of the IIIM since its establishment, not only in political terms, but also we have provided constant financial support over the last years, including through voluntary contributions to the mechanism. We are aiming, despite budgetary restrictions, to do so again this year. The inclusion in the regular budget 2020-21 was an important step, and we believe that full funding should come from the regular budget in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, accountability for the most serious crimes under international law remains a priority of Austrian foreign policy, and as I have hopefully proven today. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Austria. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. The United States extends its gratitude to Mr. Robert Petit and the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism for their critical work to advance justice and accountability in Syria. Stability in Syria requires holding perpetrators of crimes over the past 14 years accountable and providing meaningful justice to victims. Even without access to the country, over the past 8 years, the IIIM has made remarkable strides in collecting, consolidating, preserving, and analyzing evidence of international humanitarian law violations and human rights violations and abuses. This work has supported landmark trials convicting and indicting regime officials and ISIS members of war crimes. With Assad out of Syria, there is now a historic opportunity for the IIIM to expand on these strides and more comprehensively fulfill its mandate. Mr. President, we welcomed the interim authorities providing access for the IIIM to enter Syria for the first time. Continued access is imperative for the urgent documentation and preservation of evidence of regime abuses to support ongoing and future accountability efforts. We urge interim authorities to provide and we encourage the interim authorities, UN entities, and Syrian civil society organizations to effectively coordinate. Mr. President, the United States supports the continued work of the IIIM and urges member states to fund the IIIM as it receives increased demands for assistance during this window of opportunity to shape a new Syria. Meaningful justice and accountability are critical to preventing atrocities like those we saw on the coast and build sustainable peace in this country marred by destabilizing violence. Now is the time, more than ever, to reaffirm the IIIM's mandate and support this critical work. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United States. We have heard the last speaker. Before proceeding further with the debate, members are reminded that as announced in the Journal of the United Nations, we will hear an address by His Excellency Santiago Peña Palacios, President of the Republic of Paraguay, at the 60th plenary meeting. After the address, the 65th plenary meeting will be resumed to continue the debate. The meeting is suspended. The 65th plenary meeting of the General Assembly is resumed. The Assembly will continue its consideration of sub-item A of Agenda Item 32 entitled Prevention of Armed Conflict. I'll now give the floor to His Excellency Jean-Noël Barrot, Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France.
Il n'y a pas de paix sans la justice.
There cannot be peace without justice. And this is why the unspeakable and countless crimes committed by Bashar al-Assad and his bloody regime cannot go unpunished. There cannot be justice without truth. And this is why, despite the nausea, the emotion, the shock we feel, we need to look at the atrocities committed by this regime against the Syrian people. We must look at them with our eyes wide open. Justice. Justice for the 500,000 Syrians who were assassinated, for the 15,000 children who were killed or injured since the 2011 repression. Justice for women, children, and men asphyxiated by the thousand owing to the use of sarin gas, a poison used on a large scale by the regime against its own people. Justice for the victims of arbitrary detention, sexual violence, torture, the gruesome enterprise of the Bashar al-Assad regime. Justice for the Syrians who were displaced or massacred in Aleppo, in Idlib, and in eastern Ghouta. Justice for all of those who perished in the Sednaya prison, a torture center, a human slaughterhouse designed for killing. Justice for all of the deaths. And I saw this with my own eyes, this industrial machine which was created to break, to squash bodies, and to break spirits. I will never forget it. None of this will extinguish the flame of Syrian resistance, which prevailed over its killers. None of these crimes should go unpunished. Nor can we forget the crimes committed by Daesh, by the Islamic terrorists. I am referring to the terrorist attacks committed in Syria and outside it. I am referring to the victims of the terrorist attacks committed on the 13th of November 2015 in Paris, in Nice, and in Saint-Étienne-de-Rouvray. I am referring to the public beheadings, to the persecution of minorities, and attempts to commit genocide against the Yazidi people. And let us not forget the repugnant practice of sexual slavery. President, avoiding human tragedies such as these coming to pass again is the reason the United Nations was founded 80 years ago, the very reason the United Nations Charter was drafted. The report we have before us is unequivocal. It is further proof that the Bashar al-Assad regime is responsible for crimes against humanity. There cannot be justice without truth, nor truth without justice. And that is why we're here today, to support mechanisms such as the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism, which is helpful in gathering and preserving evidence. It is thanks to this evidence that on the 24th of May 2024, the Cour d'Assises in Paris, the French criminal court, convicted 3 high-ranking Syrian officials to life in prison for being complicit in crimes against humanity and war crimes. It is thanks to the aforementioned evidence that there are 40 further investigations currently underway in France. On the 13th of February of this year, France committed itself to supporting in any way it can the political transition so as to allow the Syrian people to live in peace and liberty. But the fight against impunity shouldn't be circumscribed to the atrocities committed by the al-Assad regime. The transitional authorities must also commit to justice, as they're doing through the mechanism, as well as through their work with the OPCW. The atrocities committed on the Syrian coast in March of this year resulted in the loss of almost 1,000 civilian lives, and they were assassinated solely because of their faith. These massacres, which we've condemned in the strongest possible terms, must be punished, implacably so, as promised by the Syrian authorities. Syria cannot begin writing its history on a page stained with blood. France will remain committed to ensuring that in Syria or anywhere where atrocities are committed, to ensuring justice is done, because impunity redounds to those who commit these crimes. We need to ensure that we fulfill our moral duty, and we need justice to become a reality. Syrians have been fighting for this since 2011, and France will stand by their side for truth, justice, and peace. I thank you.
I thank the Honourable Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France. I now give the floor to distinguished representative of Italy.
Mr. President, Italy aligns itself with the statement delivered by the representative of the European Union. I would like to add some remarks in national capacity. At the outset, we would like to congratulate Mr. Robert Petit on taking up his new role as head of the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism to assist in the investigation of persecution of persons responsible for the most serious crimes under international law committed in the Syrian Arab Republic. We also would like to acknowledge the presence and statements of Syria's foreign ministers, al-Shaibani, which testifies to the significant developments Syria has undergone in the last months. For the first time after many years, the Syrian people can look with hope at the prospect of a more stable, peaceful, and prosperous future for their country. It is in this context that Italy wishes to reiterate its continued support for a Syrian-owned, Syrian-led, UN-facilitated political transition, and in this respect we welcome the continuing efforts of the UN Special Envoy, Geir Pedersen. We are also convinced that accountability for the most serious crimes committed by any party during the conflict, in particular war crimes and crimes against humanity, must be pursued in the framework of and in line with the national reconciliation process. Accountability for those horrendous crimes is not only a moral imperative, but also a deterrent of future violations and fundamental element of any reconciliation process. Impunity must end, and the new political environment in Syria is a unique opportunity for meaningful transitional justice for the Syrian people, in which national ownership will have to play a key role. It's in this spirit that Italy strongly supports the 3IM, together with the other UN bodies established for the purpose of accountability in Syria, such as the Commission of Inquiry, the OPWC Investigation and Identification Team, and the Independent Institution on Missing Persons in the Syrian Arab Republic, as a key mechanism for the collection, consolidation, preservation, analysis, and sharing of evidence of grave violations of human rights law and international humanitarian law. Mr. President, Italy is appreciative of the progress achieved by the mechanism during the reporting period and welcomes the increasing cooperation between the mechanism and national authorities investigating and prosecuting the gravest crimes committed in Syria. National prosecutions and sentences in several countries show that the impunity gap is narrowing. At the same time, we call on the interim Syrian authorities to ensure the full cooperation of the mechanism on Syrian territory, also with a view to building capacity and supporting efforts by Syrian courts and investigators. Mr. President, the pattern observed in Syria over the years of the civil war has been a shocking one. The publication in December last year on the website of the mechanism of a public-related version of a report on the criminal activities, including torture, ill treatment, and unlawful killings in over 100 detention facilities throughout the country is a stark reminder of the systematic brutalities committed for more than a decade under the regime of Bashar al-Assad. Indiscriminate violence has often targeted the most vulnerable, such as women, girls, children, and minorities. It is in this context that Italy wishes to express its appreciation for the efforts made by the mechanism to develop thematic strategies focused on those vulnerable categories on the basis of a victim-survivor-centered approach. Cooperation with civil society organizations within and outside Syria is of paramount importance in this respect. Inclusive justice for the Syrian people can be achieved only if the perspectives of those who have suffered the most from the conflict are taken on board. Finally, let me take this opportunity to reiterate that Italy supports the funding of the 3M through the regular UN budget and through voluntary contribution. It's essential that the mechanism can count on a regular UN financial endowment in order to plan and progress in its work. Italy will continue to support within UN competent bodies a regular and adequate provision of funds for the mechanism. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Italy. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of New Zealand.
Mr. President, New Zealand thanks the head of the mechanism, Robert Petit, for presenting the 11th report of the International, Impartial and Independent Mechanism for crimes committed in the Syrian Arab Republic and for his work as the head of the mechanism. New Zealand reiterates its strong support for the mechanism's essential work in pursuit of justice and accountability for international crimes committed in Syria. New Zealand remains steadfast in our support for international law and the judicial institutions which uphold the international rules-based system. The report comes at a time of significant change. As the report acknowledged, there is now an opportunity to deliver on the international community's commitment to comprehensive justice and accountability in the Syrian Arab Republic. New Zealand welcomes the Secretary-General's commitment to helping Syrians build a country where reconciliation, justice, freedom and prosperity are shared realities for all as a path to sustainable peace. New Zealand is pleased to note that the head of the mechanism visited the Syrian Arab Republic for the first time in late December 2024 and the positive initial engagements with the interim authorities since then. We encourage continued effort to enable the mechanism to commence operations in accordance with its mandate in the Syrian Arab Republic. Mr. President, New Zealand supports the mechanism's work and we will continue to follow its progress closely. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of New Zealand and now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Switzerland.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to begin by, on behalf of my country, Switzerland, thanking Mr. Robert Petit, head of the International, Impartial and Independent Mechanism, for presenting this report. I congratulate the mechanism on the substantive progress made during this past year. Mr. President, the toppling of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad marked a watershed moment in Syria's history. Switzerland reaffirms its support for the aspirations of Syrian women and Syrian men, aspirations to live in freedom, safety and dignity. These are aspirations which cannot be achieved if perpetrators of grave violations of international law go unpunished, and if justice is not provided to the tens of thousands of victims of this conflict. A new dynamic of progress along this path seems to be on the horizon. However, it is vital that the international community remain engaged to promote accountability, justice and reparations. reparation. It is in this spirit that Switzerland supports the mechanism and has done since its creation. We will continue to support it resolutely. The current context means that the mandate of the mechanism has an unprecedented importance. The first visit of its head to Damascus, 8 years to the day after its inception, is a powerful symbol bearing witness to the fact that progress is possible in the implementation of his mandate. President, allow me to make 3 points. First of all, the new situation and the dialogue established by the mechanism with the Syrian transitional authorities offers a window of opportunity to make progress with bringing justice to the countless victims of crimes committed in Syria since 2011. In this new context, supporting the mechanism's mandate is absolutely crucial. It is vital that the mechanism's access to all of Syria's territory be guaranteed and that archives and evidence be preserved. My second point, the independent mechanism can count on the meaningful contribution of the civil society in documenting crimes committed. We must here underscore the essential role played by women in ensuring accountability. Since the very beginning of the conflict, Switzerland and the Netherlands are committed to fostering cooperation between the mechanism and Syrian civil society organizations through the Lausanne process. Switzerland remains determined to host the next meeting of that process and to continuing its support for this process. Finally, the mechanism plays a unique role to bring about impartial victim-focused justice. The growing and sustained number of requests for assistance bears witness to the trust placed in its mandate. That trust is producing concrete results. However, these successes are only possible if there is sustainable financing of the independent mechanism. We're seeing a marked increase in the mechanism's activity, and in light of the changing context, the financial needs of the mechanism are ever greater. Strengthening financial stability will determine the credibility of our collective commitment to combat impunity in Syria. President, Switzerland wishes to pay tribute to the remarkable commitment of the IIIM. Its work is crucial to achieve a lasting peace. That is true today more than ever before. We reaffirm our full support and we underscore the need to provide the necessary means for its work. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Switzerland. Now give the floor to distinguished representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Slovenia aligns itself with the statement delivered by the representative of the European Union and would like to add a few remarks in its national capacity. At the outset, we'd like to thank the head of the mechanism, Mr. Robert Petit, for presenting the IIIM's 11th report to the General Assembly, as well as for his strong leadership of this important mechanism. With the fall of Assad's regime, Syrian people demand and deserve a secure, sustainable, inclusive and peaceful future based on justice and the rule of law. These were the fundamental principles that brought on the creation of the IIIM in the General Assembly in 2016. Slovenia was advocating the creation of the IIIM and has been its staunch supporter ever since the establishment. We remain convinced that in order for the peace to be truly sustainable and society to be resilient and at peace with itself, accountability of perpetrators and justice for victims and survivors remain essential. This should be a part of credible and inclusive political transition in accordance with the key principles of the Security Council Resolution 2254. For decades, Syrians have endured injustice, and they know firsthand that impunity breeds impunity. Hospital bombings, use of chemical weapons, persecution of minorities, systematic torture, killings, and other crimes have caused immeasurable suffering for over a decade. Thus, impunity is simply not acceptable. We understand the complexity of the issue, as well as the fact that the list of urgent measures that Syria needs is extensive. We believe, however, that accountability must not be forgotten but ensured, not only for the heinous crimes committed against the Syrian people by the former regime, but also for those perpetrated by armed groups, including recent violence and killings. Credible and comprehensive accountability for violations of international humanitarian law and human rights violations and abuses should be ensured through fair and independent proceedings in accordance with international standards. Shedding light on the most severe violations of human rights is also key to national reconciliation, needed for peaceful future of the country and its people. Therefore, we encourage further efforts in this regard. Mr. President, we commend the mechanism's important work in collecting and preserving evidence of crimes committed. It is clear that the progress of investigations and prosecutions must be pursued under Syrian leadership. For justice in Syria to prevail, we call on all relevant stakeholders, including the Syrian transitional authorities, to continue engaging, coordinating, and cooperating with the mechanism. In this vein, a formal authorization by the Syrian transitional authorities of the IIIM to start working in accordance with its mandate in Syria would be an important step in this direction. This is a critical moment for Syria, and the international community needs to stand in support of Syrian people and their endeavor for truth, justice, and reconciliation. This also means stepping up the support for the mechanism, including sufficient funding that is required to carry out its mandate in full. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Slovenia. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Hungary.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hungary aligns itself with the statement of the European Union made on behalf of its 27 member states. We also extend our appreciation to Mr. Robert Petit, head of the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism, the IIIM, for presenting the mechanism's 11th report. 14 years into the Syrian conflict, the suffering of the Syrian people remains profound. Yet today, there is a historic opportunity to reunite, rebuild, and lay the foundations for a future rooted in peace and dignity. Hungary turns with expectations towards the Syrian interim government to make good use of this opportunity. A few weeks ago, UN Special Envoy Pedersen reminded us that, and I quote, "Syrian families continue to mourn the loss of loved ones, communities remain fractured, millions remain uprooted from their homes, and far too many persist in their search for the missing." End of quote. Hungary strongly condemns the recent surge in violence targeting civilians, mainly minority Alawites in Syria's coastal region, which tragically demonstrates the serious tensions in its society. We call upon the relevant authorities to protect all civilians, including ethnic and religious minorities, to ensure accountability for the perpetrators, and to uphold their obligations under international law. It is imperative to create the conditions for an inclusive, peaceful political transition, one that enables the safe, voluntary, and dignified return of refugees. In this regard, the transitional authorities bear a special responsibility. They must uphold human rights, including the human rights of women and children, guarantee non-sectarian governance, and protect all religious and ethnic communities, among them Christian minorities, without discrimination. It is equally vital to preserve Syria's irreplaceable cultural heritage. Hungary continues to support the work of UN Special Envoy Pedersen and underlines the importance of an inclusive and Syrian-led political process that meets the legitimate aspirations of the Syrian people, in line with the core principles of UN Security Council Resolution 2254. Hungary also emphasizes the importance of the fight against terrorism, preventing of re-emergence of terrorist groups, and of the destruction of Syria's remaining chemical weapons stockpiles. In this context, we welcome the reported progress within the IIIM structural investigations. These efforts continue to build essential foundations for justice, both now and in the future, including in cases related to detention crimes linked to the Assad regime, atrocities committed by Daesh, and unlawful attacks involving chemical weapons. We commend the mechanism's proactive engagement with national war crimes units through the sharing of data, analysis, and case-related insights that facilitates justice in third state jurisdictions. Hungary is firmly committed to accountability. In recent years, the High Court of Budapest concluded its first case involving a Daesh-affiliated individual responsible for crimes against humanity in Syria, adjudicated under the principle of universal jurisdiction. This case was handled with the utmost care, underscoring our readiness to support broader accountability efforts. At the same time, we accentuate that transitional justice processes must be rooted in Syria, led by Syrians. We welcome the IIIM's ongoing support for such domestic initiatives, as reflected in the report. Comprehensive transitional justice is indispensable for achieving meaningful reconciliation. Mr. President, in conclusion, we reiterate our steadfast commitment to the mechanism, as the ongoing conflict continues to have serious repercussions for regional stability and international security, and look forward to continuing our constructive dialogue in the future. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Hungary. I now give the floor to distinguished representative Athessia.
Mr. President, at the outset, let me express our gratitude to Mr. Robert Petit, the head of the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism, for the pertinent mechanism's 11th report. The Czech Republic fully supports this statement as delivered on behalf of the European Union and its member states, and wishes to add the following remarks in its national capacity. The report describes in detail the comprehensive work of the mechanism, which has proven its crucial role in accountability efforts for Syria. An interplay among actors involved in the accountability system is vitally important. In this regard, we positively note the significance of the mechanism's evidence sharing for national jurisdictions, as well as for the proceedings before the International Court of Justice. We are also convinced that cooperation between the mechanism and OPCW and its investigation and identification team related to the use of toxic chemicals is critical for bringing those responsible to justice. The report noted important developments with respect to the constructive engagement of the Syrian transitional government with the mechanism. We hope that the formal authorization to start operating in Syria will follow soon, in order to allow the mechanism to assess evidence preservation needs and priorities on the ground. Mr. President, we know that sustainable and predictable financing of the mechanism is a highly pertinent issue, in particular taking into account the current developments. Mindful of the mechanism's worthwhile mandate, the Czech Republic has contributed to the mechanism since its establishment and continued to do so with extra budgetary funding to complement the regular budget. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Czechia. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Turkey.
Mr. President, at the outset, I would like to thank you for convening this meeting and Mr. Robert Petit for his comprehensive briefing. I also warmly welcome Foreign Minister Sheybani. His presence here today reflects the commitment of Syria for accountability and dialogue under the new administration. Mr. President, in Syria, a new chapter has opened in December 2024 with the fall of the Assad regime and the triumph of the Syrian people. After years of enduring the brutality of the regime, Syrian people have reclaimed their destiny at last. Convening of the National Dialogue Conference, the announcement of the Constitutional Declaration, establishment of an inclusive transitional government, are important milestones on the path towards peace and reconciliation. We firmly believe that in a conflict such as Syria's, where hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians lost their lives and countless others were forcibly detained or disappeared, there can be no genuine reconciliation and no lasting peace without accountability is served. Addressing the legitimate grievances of the Syrian people must remain at the center of all post-conflict efforts. In this respect, we welcome increased engagement between the Syrian administration and the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism. In this regard, the visit of the President of the IIIM to Damascus in December was a significant development. It marks the first such high-level contact between the mechanism and the Syrian authorities. We view this development as a potential step towards greater transparency and cooperation. We encourage the mechanism to continue and enhance this dialogue. Mr. President, Turkey consistently stood at the forefront of international efforts to alleviate immense human suffering caused by this conflict in Syria. We continue to host millions of Syrians, provide and facilitate uninterrupted humanitarian assistance across our borders. At the same time, we remain firmly committed to promoting accountability and combating impunity. With this understanding, Turkey has supported and closely cooperated with all UN accountability mechanisms in relation to Syria. In this regard, we recognize the vital role of mechanism plays in documenting the serious crimes committed since 2011. As a co-sponsor of the General Assembly resolution that created the mechanism and a contributor to its budget, Turkey will continue to support its essential work. We also encourage the international community to allocate adequate funding to the mechanism in order to sustain its activities. To conclude, Mr. President, Turkey reaffirms its commitment to supporting the Syrian people in building a future based on justice, dignity, and peace so that the atrocities will not be repeated again. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Turkey. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, the delegation of Ukraine aligns itself with the statement delivered by the EU delegation and wishes to make the following remarks in its national capacity. Ukraine welcomes the 11th report of the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism on Syria and commends the mechanism's tireless work in the pursuit of justice for victims and survivors of the most serious crimes under international law committed in the Syrian Arab Republic since March 2011. Today, we meet at a historical juncture for Syria. Following the end of Bashar al-Assad's rule in December 2024, a long-awaited opportunity has emerged for comprehensive justice and accountability. For the first time in 14 years, there is a real prospect to deliver on the promises made by the international community, promises of justice, truth, reconciliation, and sustainable peace. Ukraine strongly supports the efforts of the IIIM to ensure that perpetrators of international crimes are held accountable. We commend the mechanism's first ever visit to the Syrian Arab Republic in December 2024 and its initial positive engagement with the caretaker authorities. We emphasize the importance of full cooperation with the IIIM by all member states, including the facilitation of access, the implementation of cooperation frameworks, and the provision of support services for witnesses. We also underscore the need for coordination with the United Nations system and other international organizations to strengthen evidence-sharing mechanisms and avoid duplication of efforts. Mr. President, accountability is a cornerstone of sustainable peace, not an obstacle to it. All victims and survivors in Syria demand and deserve justice that is fair, independent, and inclusive. We therefore reiterate our strong support for the IIIM's victim and survivor-centered approach, its thematic strategies on gender, children, and youth, and its broader justice objectives. Only by ensuring that the voices of all victims are heard and addressed can we hope to achieve lasting reconciliation and build resilient, peaceful societies. Furthermore, we urge the immediate withdrawal of Russian military forces from Syria. The continued presence of foreign forces in the country undermines efforts to achieve justice, accountability, and lasting peace. To conclude, Ukraine calls on all member states to prioritize accountability for the most serious international crimes committed in Syria and to support an inclusive, comprehensive transitional justice process that upholds the rights and dignity of all those affected. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Ukraine. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Croatia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Croatia aligns itself with the statement of the European Union, and I would like to add some remarks in my national capacity. Distinguished delegates, for 14 years, the Syrian people were suffering unspeakable horror, and for 14 years, Croatia, like many here, was calling for accountability, speaking up for the people of Syria, and lending support to efforts trying to achieve justice. And in the past years, it seemed at times we were just repeating the same speech over and over again, calling for access, calling for accountability, advocating for the missing, but to no avail. The recent visits to Damascus by the head of the mechanism and the constructive conversations with the Syrian authorities offer promise and hope. Croatia is closely following the transformation that Syria is currently going through. This transition represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reverse the cycle of conflict that has fed despair, displacement, and terrorism. The